till that point, we were talking with you about the DevOps in a context of build and release automation. And we talked about different routines that you already familiarize yourself with. So you have a design phase, a code phase, a building, deploying, and monitoring and learning phase of basically your project. Now, there is one more area that cannot be neglected, and I'm talking about the security here. So if we want to also have our project secure and reliable, we need to make this transition from the DevOps to the DevSecOps. And what this transition means, actually, it means that now we need to also invite someone from the security department to join all those stages, all those routines. So if before that we're talking about having the joint conversation between dev and ops department, now that needs to be kind of a joint conversation between three departments, dev, sec, and ops. And while we are talking about security, this is actually a good question. So I want my application to be secure, but can I define what secure actually means to me? For example, I mostly have a development background, so for me, when I talk about security, it's, like, let's do not store our credentials in the clear text, which is kind of a good idea in the first place, but is it everything? Maybe it's a bit more. So when we're talking about defining the security, we can say that we can have like this level of security, which is more or less zero security, or we can have this level of security, which is kind of absolute security. You're in a tank and you're kind of protected from anything that potentially may happen. What is the truth actually for each and every project is that I never actually experienced the project which was on the left or on the right side of the scale. We're always somewhere in between. Let me give an example from the bank domain, for example. So from the banking domain, let's say that we're working on a public website of this bank, and we all understand that in that case we may have some regulations, we may have some security requirements and stuff like that. But believe me, we have those, but they are much more lighter than those requirements for the core banking system, for example. So even if you're working on that kind of a project, your secure definition will be still more or less, let's say, in a left half of this slide. If you're working with the core banking system, then your security will be on the right part of this slide. But in both cases, you will still need to address the security concerns. So if you are a developer and if you don't know exactly where to start, so there are a lot of things that you can check in the first place, but the number one, the top priority will be the OWASP. OWASP stands for Open Web Application Security Project, and they do have a lot of top 10 lists. This is the first thing that you need to check. They do have a top 10 for web projects, for example, also for mobile applications and stuff like that. So go there and check it out. And now I want to talk about the few tools which actually can help you to make your application less vulnerable and more secure. The first tool I would like to talk about called White Source Bolt. So basically what this tool is about, this is the pretty simple tool, which scans all your dependencies that you may have in your project for vulnerabilities. So if I'm creating my own code, I'm usually using some other dependencies. Some of them may be open source, some may be not, but in any case, there may be some vulnerabilities in those which can actually affect my application. And on the other hand, if I don't want to use those libraries, that will actually mean that I need to re-implement them myself and also manage the security of those libraries myself, which is actually even worse. So the White Source Bolt tool, it will scan your project, scan all the dependency, check each of those for the well-known vulnerabilities, and then provide you with the report and also recommendations, what you can do with that. The next tool I would like to talk a bit about, that called Snyk. It's basically doing the same. It also will scan your code for vulnerabilities, but what is important here that Snyk, it can scan the code itself, your source code basically, but in addition to that, it can also scan your Docker images. So check that tool as well. And the third tool that also kind of a good start, that's the SonarQube. So for the SonarQube, it will again scan your source code, and it will scan your source code against the same vulnerabilities as I was talking about when I was talking about the OWASP. So without further ado, let's go and see how it can be implemented in our Azure DevOps pipelines. Before you will be able to integrate those tools within your pipelines, you need to do two other things first. So step one, you need to go to the marketplace and you need to install the corresponding plugins for those tools. And step two, you need to go to the service connections area and configure the service connections. So let me show to you what it actually means. So first of all, here I am on my Azure DevOps and click here, Browse Marketplace. I will open this guy in a new tab. So here I am on the marketplace, and let's start with white source. I will just type white and click search, and as you can see, I have my white source plugins here. So first of all, I need to install those. Then we talked about Snyk. One plugin for Snyk also needs to be installed, and we were talking about Sonar. So Sonar here, what is worth mentioning is that there are two basically options for Sonar. You can either use the fully managed solution provided by the Sonar itself, and then you will need to use the Sonar Cloud. Or you can host your SonarQube on-premise. In that case, you need to use the SonarQube activity. Okay, so we are, let's say, done with that. I already installed those guys. So now we need to go to the step two, basically configuring the service connections. So I go to the project settings and I go to service connections area. And here, as you can see, I already configured a bunch of different service connections, but let me show to you how easy it is to add a new one. So I need to add a new service connection, and I want to start with the Snyk. As you can see, it's only one here, so Snyk, next, and I need to provide the URL of my Snyk server, and also I need to provide the API token. So basically how I handle that, I go to the snyk.com website, I create a login there, and I acquire my token from there. Then I need to provide the service connection name, and this is important, guys, because I will then refer to this connection by this name that I will put here. I will need to use this name in all my pipelines. So this is for the Snyk. Let's check for Sonar. So for Sonar, because we have two activities, as I was explaining before, for the Sonar Cloud and the SonarQube separately, so we need to configure those service connections separately as well. So for the Sonar Cloud, for example, you just need to provide a security token, and that's basically it. But if we're going for the SonarQube, you need to provide one more parameter. Because it's hosted potentially on-premise, you need to also provide the URL or the IP address basically of that instance of your SonarQube. For the white source, you don't need to configure any service connections because it works in a bit different way, but as soon as you will add the white source plugin, it will basically on the first run show you the wizard how to proceed and configure it. And now we can go and check how our pipeline with those security modifications will actually look like. Here's how my DevSecOps pipeline basically looks like. So what do I have here? First of all, I disabled all the triggers so I can run this pipeline only manually. This is for demo purposes. Also, I explicitly used the image called Windows 2019, and by that, Microsoft will basically set up an image with Windows Server 2019 and Visual Studio 2019. I need that because in that case, that will be much easier for me to integrate Sonar into my pipeline. So then let's check the pipeline itself. So the first step is called Sonar Cloud Prepare. You will be able to use this task only after you will install those plugins that I was talking about a minute ago. So here under the Sonar Cloud, you need to provide basically the name of that connection that you are creating under the service connections area. Then you need to provide the organization name within the Sonar Cloud, and my organization there called Solidify Project. Then you need to set that my scanner mode here will be MS Build. And this is why I was actually using the Windows 2019 image, and this is why it's easier for me to integrate it that way. Also, I use the project key, which is in my case Solidify Project Engine, and the project name and the project version. So now this is basically how I prepare the Sonar. Now I go with the more or less regular routine. I use .NET Core CLI to restore my packages, but what is also important here, then when it comes to basically building my app, I'm using Visual Studio Build, because underneath it will use MS Build, and Sonar will recognize that and it will start analyzing all the code that is basically building right now. In the same way, I'm running Visual Studio tests, so Sonar will again recognize that, and it will also analyze that and then provide me with the report. As soon as this is done, I'm using the task called Sonar Cloud Analyze, and as you can see, there are even no arguments for this task. And then, as soon as it's done, I need to publish that report basically to my destination server. In this case, my destination Sonar server is the Sonar Cloud. So this was kind of a more or less, let's say, relatively complicated setup. For the other tools, it's a bit more easier. So for the white source boat, I'm just using the white source boat task, and that's it. The only thing I need to provide here is basically the root folder where I have all my source files. For the snake, and here for the snake, I'm using basically the static code analyzer. What I need to do, I'm using snake security scan task, and service connection endpoint is snake cloud, basically the name of the service connection, again, that I was showing to you before under service connections area. The test type is application, and also here I provide the solution, basically the path to my solution file of this .NET application. Monitor on build equals true, fail on issue equals false, so that's basically it. Now let's try to run this activity, this pipeline, and let's try to see what will happen. So I will run it here, and what we need to do now we just need to wait. It usually takes about 5 minutes, but we will fast forward it for you, and then we will analyze all the results together. I know that you're eager to see what those reports are actually like, so let's go and check them right now. I will scroll up. All those new tabs, they are here because we installed all those plugins and integrated all those tasks in our pipeline. Let's start with the Snake report. So Snake, this is the static code analyzer which analyzed my solution. As you can see here, it analyzed all those projects as a part of my solution, and it found 8 known vulnerabilities and also 54 vulnerabilities in my dependency passes. So basically in my dependencies. So let's check the report further. The first high severity issue that I have here, this is the regular expression denial of service attack. What is important here is it basically shows me that that issue is related to the module called system.text.regular_expressions, and it was introduced because I was referring that module from my CLI project. This is important because Now I know that my solution consists of a few projects, and I know which of those are more and which of those are less vulnerable. As you can see, there's more details here about the passes. Let's scroll a bit down. What I have here as well, I have the overview and the details section. And in those sections, I really have a very good description of that kind of attack. I will show it to you right here. As you can see, a lot of text, a lot of new learnings that you as a developer potentially may get. And to fix that, what it recommends take this basic library and upgrade it to version 4.3.1 or higher. Okay, let's keep scrolling. The denial of service attack within my Microsoft NetCore app module. Let's keep scrolling. Another denial of service attack within this module, but now it's introduced into the different part of my project. So that is why I have it a few times here. Let's keep scrolling. Another denial of service attack. The next issue that it found, that's the privilege escalation. And again, it shows me that it's related to Microsoft.NET Core app module. And again, it says that I just need to update that module to the higher version where that issue is fixed. Remote code execution issue. And again, I need to upgrade my library to the latest version. Security bypass issue. And the cross-site request forgery issue. So those were all those issues that were introduced by those dependencies which were vulnerable. So this is actually a really good tool, because when you're creating your custom code, you want to care about your code only. You don't want to care about all that basic libraries that were created by other vendors. But the companies like Snyk and like White Source, they basically maintain all those knowledge bases for all of those highly, let's say, used libraries across the world with all those vulnerabilities. So they can actually help you to be protected. So we were talking about the White Source. Let's check the White Source report next. So what is important to understand here is that both Snyk and White Source, especially for this pipeline, they were implemented as a security analyzers for the static code and especially for the vulnerabilities in my dependencies. So basically, they were doing the same job. But if you will check this guy, you will see that the report is actually different. And the first difference that you can notice here is that it found 4 vulnerabilities. But which are those? The Bootstrap, the jQuery, and the jQuery again. And you may actually wonder, so I was showing you the console.NET Core app, and how the hell I have the Bootstrap and the jQuery there? And the explanation for that is actually here in my project. What I have the source code itself, and in addition to that, I have a static website with the documentation for this tool. And for that static website, I was using Bootstrap and the jQuery, and I didn't use them as a part of, for example, my package.json or any other dependency manager. I was just downloading them from the official websites as a static assets, and I was just saving them into that folder. So what is cool here is that the White Source was basically able to recognize those as some kind of well-known, highly used libraries. It was able to run all the security checks and prepare that report for me. So as you can see, the report is a bit different, but still the concept is the same. So there is a severity, there is the exact library, the description of the vulnerability or the attack, and actually how to fix that. In those cases, again, it recommends me to upgrade those libraries to the latest version. So what it also actually helps me with, it also analyzes the different licenses that I have in here. So I mean, like, I may have an issue with the license, which is not really a technical issue, it's more like a legal issue, but still, anyway, it can also help me to prevent those issues, which is actually awesome. So what is important here as a takeaway? Despite snake and white source were basically used for the same purpose, they generate the different reports. It basically means that it technically make sense for you to use different tools for the same job. Of course, not all of them, but I mean, like, here in my case, as I showed to you, I was using two different tools. They were providing two different kinds of reports with the different outcomes. And in that way, I was able to find more issues, so now I know exactly what I need to fix. And the last but not least, let's check what we have as a part of our SonarQube report. So let's go to the extensions tab, and let's go to detailed Sonar Cloud report link. I will be redirected basically to another portal, and this is the result of my SonarQube analysis. As you can see, everything is really good, so that's 0 bugs, 0 security hotspots, stuff like that. So 84 unit tests were basically run during that build, and the code coverage that I have, it's almost 70%, which is really good. I don't have any, let's say, security vulnerabilities per se, but what I have here, I have the 12 potential points where my code smells. So let me just click on this guy and let's check what the smelly code is actually look like. As you can see here, this is the really good report. For example, the first point where code smell is remove this commented out code. So let me click on this one, and as you can see, I have my .NET code, and then a few lines, they were commented, but they're still there. So that should not be happening. You have your Git repo, and that's basically it. If you don't need those lines anymore, just remove them. Don't leave those comments. And this is basically the same. Here is another recommendation. Add a protected constructor or the public keyword to the class declaration. So this is another part where the code smells. And I have some other recommendations of a different kind here as well. What is important as a takeaway? So first of all, the Sonar, it will actually also run the static code analyze against those best security practices. But in addition to that, it will help you to find and highlight those potential points where your code smells. Believe me, that will be much more easier for you to do such routines like a code review, peer review, probably pair programming, and stuff like that. So I highly recommend you to use the SonarQube and the Sonar Cloud in your projects.